I'm now joined by Dana Lewis. He's the foreign affairs analyst. So Dana, we've seen Zelenskyy on this big diplomatic push. Next stop is, of course, Brussels. But can the EU and their aid really help Zelenskyy with this war?
Well, they can certainly help him sustain the war. Win it, that's another question. But, you were talking in that report a lot about Hungary and Viktor Orban. In fact, the EU now has moved to, coincidentally and not so coincidentally, unblock $10 billion that had been frozen pending judicial reform in Hungary, just as we're coming up on this meeting with the EU tomorrow, the two-day meeting. So I think they're trying to pave the road to try and move Hungary's veto and oppositions to ascension to the European Union for Ukraine, and also this 50 billion in euro aid package that Ukraine is looking to get from Europe. So there's so much in play. And then you have, the new Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, who is absolutely pro-Ukrainian, saying Poland will be next if they don't support Ukraine. And he's talking about a full mobilization of Europe to come to Ukraine's side. But and one other thing that you should note is, remember those frozen funds from Russia in European banks when the war started. They are still frozen. It looks like the EU may approve some of the interest from those frozen funds to go to the budget of Ukraine, and that may be talked about this week. And in fact, there's over $300 billion there. What if Europe, Canada's talking about it, and the US is talking about it, what if they took those funds away from Russia and said, you're attacking Ukraine, we're going to turn all of that money over to Ukraine to help it defend itself and for reconstruction. There are 60 F-16s that are supposed to be arriving, some of them from European countries, to Ukraine in the new year. Sweden is talking about giving its Gripen aircraft. So there's just so much in play here. And I think Europe will get a sense from these meetings in Washington yesterday that it's got to step up and it's got to try to fill this massive gap in funding that the U.S. is not canceling, but is holding back on approving.
Well, it's definitely going to be a tricky summit for the EU, not least the potential bomb of Viktor Orban. But coming to the Kremlin then, how have they been reacting to Zelenskyy effectively going around with a begging bowl?
Bathing themselves, overjoyed. I think Russia's had a lot of anxious moments where they think they're going to lose this war, where, their casualty figures are up over 300,000, excuse me for that, over 300,000 according to U.S. intelligence estimates. Putin's been under a huge amount of trouble. A huge amount of pressure. He's canceled this annual, phone-in show where he talks to Russians and answers the average Russian supposedly about their concerns. Well, this year it's on. It's going to take place tomorrow. And Putin made comments over the weekend where he feels that, the assembly line of weapons is moving forward, and that it's just a matter of time before Russia has victory in Ukraine. And Russian TV channels, the propaganda channels, I mean, they're all controlled by the Kremlin anyway. They've all been, gleefully clapping and slapping each other, saying that, in the end, the money will dry up, Ukraine will lose. And then next is NATO, because Trump is coming. And they think that Trump will pull out of NATO. So the reaction in Russia is pretty astounding.
Well, let's see if Trump is coming or not. And then just finally, Dana, what's your assessment of how this war is going?
I think it's not going well for Ukraine right now. Certainly, their counteroffensive, forget about it. They're dug in. Both sides are pretty well dug in for the winter. The Russians are testing a lot of lines in Bakhmut and Zaporizhia, trying to force their way through and try to have some victory before this election, because President Putin has now announced that he's going to run for president in the spring. So they'd like to see something happen on the ground. Ukraine certainly will probably be throttling back on its expectations in terms of what it can accomplish in the battlefield without knowing that the U.S. has its back. So I think that you'll see them dig in, try to hold ground. And then, Zelensky's talking about having to change strategy altogether and not give up land. I mean, he was very passionate about that in Washington. But certainly, the only army in the world that's tried to take this kind of ground without controlling the skies is Ukraine. It's been painful. I think that you'll see them use attack aircraft in the coming year as they get them very aggressively to try to attack Crimea and try to affect those bases in Crimea that the Russians are using to launch attacks and to resupply.
Well, let's see what Ukraine can do next. Dana Lewis, thank you for analysis on the program tonight.
Thank you.